And so now we're going to pull up another video message from one of our event sponsors. It's going to be a message from Everytable and Sam Polk, who's the co-founder and CEO of Everytable, an incredible company whose mission is to make nutritious, fresh food affordable and accessible to all.
3 years ago, Everytable started as a restaurant chain aimed at redefining fast food. They wanted to take on the behemoths of the industry. But instead of burgers and fries, Everytable wanted to serve healthy meals for about $5 a piece and make them available in underserved communities. Their healthy food mission forced them to rethink what a restaurant even is. And in the process, they unknowingly set themselves up to survive in the midst of a pandemic.
It's almost like we took sort of the hardest problem in food. How do you make fresh, healthy food and sell it for less than the price of fast food? And now we've gotten there.
So how'd they do it?
Hey everybody, Sam Polk at Everytable here. It's Sunday morning and we are about to go out on delivery, bring in healthy food to all the seniors of Los Angeles in partnership with the city of Los Angeles and with Mayor Garcetti.
Dan Rita, good morning. This program really makes sure that some of the most vulnerable Angelinos stay inside during these stay-at-home orders. And seniors who register, they get 2 meals a day delivered directly to their homes.
We're feeding seniors who are trapped in their homes because of coronavirus, and we're feeding all the people that are unhoused that the city is moving into shelters and hotels.
On March 15th, Governor Gavin Newsom announced that seniors needed to self-isolate to protect themselves from COVID-19. We knew that meant that hundreds of thousands of Los Angeles seniors would be unable to feed themselves because they couldn't afford expensive food delivery options like Uber Eats and Instacart. So the next morning, Everytable launched our Everytable helpline to make sure we could connect the most vulnerable seniors with food relief resources. And that was the moment that our food relief emergency services began. And since then, we have delivered over 100,000 meals per week to the most vulnerable seniors across Los Angeles. And still to this day, we receive over 100 phone calls to our Everytable helpline. Now, most of those phone calls are seniors who are receiving our meals, calling to thank us, or just to connect with somebody and talk. And we just want to say thank you to everybody that has participated with this, and that this is not just a crisis of hunger, but it's also a crisis of isolation, and that this is something that we can all solve through connection together.
Excellent message from Everytable and Sam Polk. And I'll also note that we're just so appreciative of the fact that in conjunction with this summit, Everytable has delivered 150 fresh, nutritious meals to residents of the NoHo Senior Arts Colony. And you're about to hear from Tim Carpenter of Engage, an incredible organization that actually provides creative arts programming to the residents of that building, community. And also, I'm sure you've all seen it in the chat, and I'm seeing great Everytable information in the chat. Every single person who's attending, who's in the Everytable delivery area is eligible, can use a code to receive 2 free meals and free delivery on your first Everytable subscription, which is just great. And I think what I'm seeing from the chat is the only problem there is that they're not beyond LA, and we need Everytable and Everytables everywhere. So hopefully we can work towards that with our small and mighty coalition here. And now I'd like to bring back Lisa Marsh Ryerson, the president of AARP Foundation. Thank you again, Lisa, for joining us. And this is to kick off our final session here, Connecting the Dots, Social Prescribing, Social Justice, and Social Connection. Take it away, Lisa.
Thanks, Scott. It's so great to be with you and with Bob and Paul and Nora. And Maureen and others. What an incredible day we're having. And I'm delighted to be joined by a really wonderful expert panel as we talk about social isolation, social prescribing, social justice in increasing connection across this nation for vulnerable older adults. But while we're following these terrific panels, such important words and conversations from Ina and Kim and Mark and Sachin, Nora, Carla, Donna, Laura, and Jenny. I don't know about you, Scott, but I am reminded today during this 4th annual summit of how much I have learned from so many of you over these years as we work together to increase connection for vulnerable older adults. And I've been so pleased today to hear us talk about the power of connection, what we need to do to build evidence-based solutions that address individual needs, and what we need to do to build those important connections that increase collaboration among and between organizations. We have our own connecting work to do, and the Motion Picture and Television Fund with Milken at this summit are providing such a great platform for that to happen. Before I introduce our panelists, I want to let everyone know that at AARP Foundation, we're working to end senior poverty. And we do so by creating and advancing effective solutions. It's why we've been so pleased to support the work of MPTF, to support the work of Jeremy Nobel and the Unlonely Project, to support the work of some of our affordable senior housing providers who are on today's summit, as they've worked with us to pilot the use of, for example, AARP Foundation's Connected Communities program, where smart speakers are given to residents. And they can connect with technology by using just their voice. It really is a leapfrogging technology and addresses so many of the questions in the chat about what happens in teaching technology to older adults who may have some limitations when using it. I'm also reminded of the importance of innovation. So many of you here are developers of technology and innovators. At AARP Foundation, on our connect2effect.org site, you'll learn about our chatbot tool that uses chatbot coaching to help vulnerable older adults connect with one another. So know that we're here to advance the good work of so many of your organizations, all the while innovating and creating our own work. It was so terrific to hear from Julianne Holt-Lundstadt and from Carla Parasanotto as well. AARP Foundation was the proud sponsor of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine's report on social isolation and loneliness, because the future will also require that we continue to invest in important research that will guide us to use, as was the case in this report, the underutilized capacity of the healthcare system, but also to use evidence as we're working together to build sustainable, scalable solutions. And now I'm happy to ask my panelists to turn on their videos for those who are using, and let me introduce you and we'll get started. Thrilled to be joined by Tim Carpenter, who is the founder and CEO of Engage. Tim created also the Burbank Senior Artists Colony, the first of its kind senior apartment community with access to arts amenities and programs. It serves as a model now for the multiple subsequent Engage communities that you'll be hearing about this afternoon. What a delight to be joined by Romilla Batra, the Chief Medical Officer of the SCAN Health Plan. Romilla sets clinical policies and procedures for SCAN, and she helps design clinical initiatives that support healthy, independent aging, and she leads Independence at Home, one of SCAN's many community services. I'm also delighted to be joined by an incredible colleague, Sheila Shapiro, who is the Senior Vice President of National Strategic Partnerships for UnitedHealthcare's Clinical Services Organizations. And Sheila, a thank you and shout out to you and our colleagues at UnitedHealthcare, because you power and sponsor connect2effect.org. Sheila develops and implements industry-leading models to standardize and use non-traditional data and partnerships to improve health outcomes and to build and improve those at scale. Sheila is well known across the industry and across the nation as an expert in leveraging data and technology to address the social determinants of health. And finally, what a pleasure it is to be on a panel again with you, Dr. Dora Hughes. Dora is an Associate Research Professor of Health Policy and Management at the Milken Institute School of Public Health at George Washington University. Dora's work focuses on the intersection of clinical and community health, social determinants of health, health equity, healthcare, quality, and workforce. Again, thrilled to be with each and every one of you. And we've heard so much today about the notion of sort of shared or collective vulnerability around the issue of social isolation and loneliness during the pandemic. I think what we all know, and it's been addressed earlier today, for vulnerable older adults and vulnerable people who have suffered for a long time, given structural or systemic inequities and racism and ageism in our nation, and those who suffered from isolation and loneliness, they don't want to go back to normal. You know, they're hoping that we're going to build something going forward that is far more inclusive in terms of addressing health equity and inclusive in terms of accessing opportunity. So I know I have the right panel to get at that discussion. Dr. Batra, I want to start with you, Romilla, and I want you to talk about your work as the Chief Medical Officer at the SCAN Health Plan. Why is it so important in your work to address social isolation and loneliness among older adults?
Yeah, thanks for asking me the question. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Awesome. So, human beings are social creatures to begin with. We thrive and we flourish with connections, being connected to each other. The literature has shown us over and over again, when people are socially isolated, they are more at risk of getting certain conditions more than the others. There's also risk of getting heart conditions, there's risk of depression and things like that. Interestingly enough, when we look in our data, and I want to just talk a little bit about SCAN, we see the same. So for those of you who do not know us, SCAN Health Plan is a not-for-profit Medicare Advantage plan based out of California. Not only do we serve our members with the health plan, but we also have a community-based organization called Independence at Home that also serves seniors and older adults in the communities as well as their caregivers. So to give you a little example, a couple of years back, we started doing social health risk assessment. I know all of us in health are very familiar with health risk assessment where we ask about medical conditions, but what was becoming very apparent to us that there is more to healthcare than just health. It's more around social needs assessment as well. And for us, our roots are born in social HMO. We were started by 12 angry seniors who believe there's more to health than just doctors and hospitals. So our model is truly a social model that integrates with itself the medical model as well. So when we did the social HRAs, which has questions around your living status, your access to food, your access to social support, and then isolation, both on the communities that we serve through our clients as well as on the health plan side, we saw a very apparent need for social factors like food and transportation, but also social support. So yes, I see social isolation as a piece of it, but social support. When we asked people, the question we asked was around not only the social loneliness index from UCLA, but we asked them, when you need emotional support and when you need social support, do you have enough social support? There was a big blip in terms of people saying, no, I don't have it, I could use some help. And then it was further validated by the pandemic that came along, right? So we took the data of the folks who said, yes, I need help with social support, I need help with food and transportation, and we overlaid it with our own outcomes. So when we looked at folks who ended up getting to the hospital, getting admitted to the hospital, ER visits, there was a distinct correlation. And I know there's studies to do that, but nobody's done a correlation study. So if somebody said, yes, I need social support, what we noticed was their outcomes were worse. We noticed that they were going to the ER more. We noticed that they were using the hospitals more. We noticed that they were more likely to have certain chronic conditions that were not managed. So for us, it was an imperative, not only in the plan membership that we serve, but also the communities that we serve, that we do something above and beyond, making sure they have the best doctors, best technology, best medications to meet the social needs.
Yeah. Thanks, Romilla. And I love that you're talking about it from a holistic, whole person service model. In fact, my colleagues at AARP completed a study that found that from a Medicare spending standpoint, an additional $7 billion a year is spent because of social isolation. So it really is part of overall well-being. Dora, that leads me to you, which is thinking about social determinants of health, sort of the intersectionality of individuals' identity and also of community supports. And when you think about your work in public health, what might you recommend or want us to know about public health approaches to addressing isolation and loneliness?
Yes, I want to start, Lisa, by thanking you and the AARP Foundation for inviting me to be part of this important summit. I think it's very interesting in the midst of the pandemic, pre-pandemic, as partly Dr. Batra was just alluding to, social isolation and loneliness. They were bad. They were also often conflated. We were trying to sort out, what do we do? And then in the pandemic, it became, okay, to protect yourself, you need to socially isolate yourself and make sure you're avoiding contact with individuals because older Americans and others with certain conditions are at higher risk. And then all of a sudden it was like, but wait a moment, we know social isolation, if those that are already at risk, their outcomes will be even worse. And so then it was trying to sort this out. And I think that some of the lessons from the pandemic, it helped us really sharpen our thinking, being very clear about our messaging and communication, physical isolation versus social isolation. And so I think that we are at this point in time really thinking carefully about what do we need to address? How do we talk about this with communities, and who are all the various sectors that need to be involved? And then so getting to your question, we are hearing more about what the healthcare system is doing, and certainly that is very critical. But the public health approach is very critical as well, and that's moving not just from the individual services that need to be provided to the individual interventions, but what do we do at a community level? That is the public health approach. How do we focus at the community level at addressing some of these issues? And I'll give you one example briefly of an intervention that is gaining traction even pre-pandemic and certainly even more now, and that's what we call accountable communities for health. It's a loose term for multi-sector collaborations involving public health, healthcare, and importantly, social services, whether that's the transportation or education or the business sector, everyone coming together to think at a community level, how can we, for example, build better housing to improve social cohesion in neighborhoods? How do we address transportation at a community level to make sure that individuals are able to get out, and not just to the hospital, but maybe to church or to the grocery stores? How do we address income issues at a community level to make sure that there are job opportunities? So that is an example of an upstream, community-focused public health approach. And there are others, but that we think are critically needed at this point in time.
Yeah, thanks, Dora. And we'll want you to jump in with others later, but I'm so pleased that you reminded us that all the while that we're thinking about evidence-based scalable solutions, we have to remember that the work at its core is really deeply local.
Yes.
And that addressing structural inequities and creating communities that are livable, by that I mean inclusive of all people who live there, and creating those connections requires us to have not just the will, but the will and the patience to design with more individuals and organizations. So very much appreciate your words, Dora. Sheila, again, what a delight it is to have you on this panel. And Sheila, I'd love for you to talk about the work you've been leading at UHC to address social isolation, because you've been in this work for many years now. What are you finding that's working, maybe what isn't working? I'll turn it to you, Sheila.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the opportunity to join today. It's wonderful to hear so many different organizations and the coming together of a common goal of trying to enhance the communities in which we all live. At UnitedHealthcare, truly this very similar to Dr. Batra's comments, we have been working in the space of social determinants of health for over 6.5 years now, and really trying to understand how we do something at a very localized level with community organizations and that safety net that is so critical, but be able to scale it to show the order of magnitude of impact that organizations can have on overall health and well-being. UnitedHealthcare is the largest insurer of individuals over 65 through their Medicare Advantage and Med Sup plans. And we have an obligation to those over 12.5 million members to look at different ways of solving their critical needs. And so we have done a significant work in screening, to date we have screened several million people, and we've assisted those individuals in getting to services. As we worked with the AARP Foundation, we are very fortunate to have met Lisa and her team early in our work and the development of the model. We added screening questions related to social isolation. And what we found in the screens that we've done so far is that over 150,000 people have recognized that they are socially isolated. And what we've done at a much more granular level, because that's nice to know at the macro level, but then taking it down to the community level, we are working again with the AARP Foundation on an isolation pilot where we're connecting seniors with community-based, not social services, but social organizations. And we found an amazing early adoption and success. We started this work before COVID and actually had to pivot the pilot because obviously we were trying to bring people together physically, and then we paused during the initial stages of COVID, and then we just began June 1st to do more virtual connections. We found that about 2/3 of the people that we're engaging with are actually interested in that virtual connection rather than no connection at all. But we're also finding, which has been brought up earlier, that many of our seniors are not tech savvy, and even though virtual tools such as Zoom and other resources are available, they're not comfortable with using them, even though they want to engage. And so as part of our program work now, we have a one-on-one tech support where we're helping people over the phone get comfortable with using the tools. And we're finding a very high participation rate, over now about 85% of people are trying to connect through a virtual method, even though many of them still would prefer to go back to that face-to-face.
Sheila, thanks so much for talking about our pilot and other work we've done together. And I also appreciate that you brought up, and Sachin spoke about this earlier, actually older adults really do want to use technology. So as we're building programs and resources, as long as we're doing that human-centered design, teaching about the tools as we're rolling them out, we can have success and then just pick up the phone. When we added that to the pilot, it was really, really powerful. Tim, I'm so happy to see you again. I wish I was seeing all of you in one room, but Tim, I remember the first time we met and the first time I heard you speak, and how powerful it was for me to learn what you were doing to combine really housing, which is the foundation of well-being, with the arts to inspire and engage individuals in purpose. So I wondered if you would talk with us about a bit about Engage, and also maybe bust some myths, because from my way of thinking, you're not saying someone has to see themselves as an artist to benefit from the programming. So I turn it to you, Tim.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Sam Polk and the team at Everytable for delivering meals to every resident today at the NoHo Senior Arts Colony. I love you, Sam, and for Scott Kaiser for setting that up. There are a lot of smiling faces in North Hollywood, California today because of that. So talking about the arts and housing, I guess for the arts side of it, for me, it begs a large question of what would our lives be without the arts? During this time of COVID, the thing that has held me together and most of the people I know together have been this incredible outpouring of the arts being online and connecting people with beauty and passion. And so our original idea around this was to create connectivity to the arts. And the terms we use are important. The arts are different than artists. You know, there's a mythology and a cool, unreachable factor around the term artist. But the arts are actually a very, very accessible medium for everyone. And people are capable of becoming artists. But the more important thing that we teach, and the programmatic model that we use, is we hire and train master teaching artists in every discipline of the arts under the sun, and that includes creativity as well. So visual arts and music and literary, dance. We like to infuse creativity into our wellness programs, gardening and cooking. So the idea of creating an artistic infusion into housing, we put those programs and classes and workshops into semester-based programs where classes happen on a semester basis. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to learning something. They advance to higher levels of learning. One of the things that's fantastic is that there's this concept of mastery in the arts that my friend Gene Cohen, who did the first study on creativity and aging out of George Washington University, who was passed away a few years ago, but was this incredible, passionate, elfin leader. He would do presentations by using a lightsaber from Star Wars when he was presenting research to get people out of their heads on the presentation of research. And we just finished a study with UCSF on the effects of arts and aging on our populations that will soon be published in Arts and Health Journal, that showed increases in social connection and in artistic identity and mastery and psychosocial and emotional benefits, health benefits. So the idea that art is something that is outside of health is something that I think really needs to be shattered. And I watch people every day. I started as a teaching artist in my organization. I started this organization 22 years ago, and I have been a lifelong writer. I was starting a nonprofit. I was all I had. I knew writing. I knew how to teach writing, and literally walked into one of these communities and said, I'm going to start a storytelling class in the community room, and went around and knocked on people's doors, and people literally at the time thought I was insane. And we pulled together a storytelling class, and we got the city to donate the community center, and we put a staged production up there and got politicians and community leaders and family members to come listen, and it was transformative.
Yes.
You know, people have mentioned the idea of the importance of story, that we use that as our starter drug often because everybody is a born storyteller. So the effects of it that we've seen in community and on housing, and we work in affordable, independent housing with low-income seniors. We also have senior and multi-generational communities that we serve and have helped create over the years.
Yeah, I love the multi-generational nature of the work that you're doing, Tim, as well. And I think, you know, you're reminding us something that Jenny and others on the previous panel talked about, which is that oftentimes the gifts or the talents or the tools exist already in a community, either within organizations or within the individuals who are the community, and tapping into that purpose and that agency is really important. Another question for all of you, but we might start with Romilla and Sheila and Dora, and then certainly Tim jump in. You know, it's come up today several times, some of the other global models, whether it's the UK model or other nations, who really have embedded the notion of social prescribing or social determinants work as important work to fund really through a healthcare system to promote total well-being and increase connection. Can you talk a little bit about what are the barriers possibly in the United States for that work, or where are we seeing successes to include social determinants work? I don't know. Romilla, you want to jump in first?
Yeah, I can kick it off. Once again, we grew from a social HMO model, so we absolutely believe in the biopsychosocial model.
Right.
And so if you look at our work, we have done years worth of collecting data on social needs, but we have also done years work now with data being available. We are in the midst of how do we identify the population? How do we stratify the population? How do we make sure we're connecting them to the right interventions, and then how do we close the loop? So for us, the three huge needs, when we do our social HRA, we've been collecting data for many years. The three big areas of need are around food and nutrition. They are around transportation. And when I say transportation, it's not medical transportation, but also transportation to senior centers or grocery stores.
Get to your job.
Or going to your work, exactly. And then the last one is around social support. Those are three big areas that have emerged for us. So as we are thinking of addressing that, what we have realized that, it's like a river. You have to go upstream and help strengthen the community capacity, because that's where you find these valuable jewels like, what work Engage is doing, how do we support them? And then you go midstream, and this is where we're working up with our provider partners to say, hey, we have identified this population. We understand perhaps you may not have the capacity, refer them to us so we can help you with it. And then go downstream, and this is where we personalize it, make it person-centered to say, okay, this is Romilla. Romilla lives in Hemet. Hemet doesn't have access to a senior center. How do we get her to get connected virtually or through a volunteer? What can be done?
Yeah.
So we are individualizing interventions, but we absolutely understand the huge role that they're playing. So for us, the few ways we have dealt with that individual level is, on the health plan side, thanks to CMS, now we can offer benefits that address their social needs, which help improve health outcomes. Right. So for example, we have transportation now available for folks to go to grocery store or to their temple or church that they want to go to. That was not possible 2 years back. Yes. Similarly, we now also have food. We deliver food to folks who have chronic conditions who may not be able to leave their home. Once again, that wasn't possible a while back. Respite care, that's so important for our caregivers to be able to do that.
Yes.
So those are the benefits that we've been able to design. But then taking it a step further, we realized that perhaps not all benefits will meet their needs. So how can we, create programs to meet their needs? So we have peer advocates. We have taken our own members and trained them in motivational interviewing and equip them with phones and iPads now to connect with other folks like them so they can build that connectedness, so as to say more so now than ever. But we have done other programs like through our community benefit called Cyber Seniors, we call it, where we take a volunteer who can then go into somebody's home and say, hey, let me show you how to play with your email. Let me show you how to get your iPad connected. And so we have kind of leveraged that. And last but not the least, we truly believe in the power of the community-based organizations. So we have created this, what we call a closed loop community resource navigation, taking the concept of social prescribing. So we have identified you, looks like you're Martha, looks like you love quilt making. Let me see what quilt making resources are available in your community. And so we use a platform like Aunt Bertha and connect. And when we connect, we don't just say, okay, here's the address, you're on your own, good luck, do it. We make sure there's a warm handoff. We make sure that loop is closed so people can then avail it. So that's how we have kind of approached social determinants of health, because we absolutely buy into it.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work to do. By the way, there's a great program created by a wonderful woman in Canada called Cyber Seniors that is intergenerational.
Oh, really?
Training seniors to use technology. Sheila, you did quite a bit of work at UHC. In particular, you really had a project going, if I remember it right, around ICD codes.
Yes, and I think to just tag on to the conversation, it really is about a new way of working together. We're seeing different organizations come together to solve problems in a much more comprehensive way. And I think that's one component of change. The other is as Dr. Batra said, public policy change is critical. And so as CMS allows health plans to think more broadly, it allows us to take what I call this as this newly known information and start to figure out how do we not only keep things local and individualized, but show the impacts of the social safety net on overall health. And so as we went down this path, the ICD-10 codes, or those codes that physicians use when they're diagnosing what is wrong with someone, is very limited as it relates to social determinants of health. As we began taking in these screenings, we now have 50 million pieces of information that allows us to say, here are those other core social determinants of health that are coming to the top. While we see the similar ones that Dr. Batra said, we also see that inability to pay for utilities is a critical issue. So people may not go and get their prescriptions because not only do they have no place to put fresh food, they may not have a place to even refrigerate necessary medications. So there are many coalitions, and we are called the National Strategic Partnership Division for a reason. It's really trying to not look for a funding change to be the only solution, but to bring everyone together and find what I call that center of goodness, where we can all bring what our best works is and create a model that we can do in a closed loop fashion.
Great.
So tools like Aunt Bertha are great. There are other tools with like Healthify and others across the country. And again, some of them are very specific to a location. So in the model that UnitedHealthcare has built, we had to take into consideration all of those aggregators of social services and figure out a way to bring that information into a collective view at a member level.
Yes.
That's where those ICD-10 codes come in. We made recommendation to that International Code Committee last year on behalf of the industry to expand the code set so we can start to integrate social determinants of health into the thinking of physician practices, because we're moving in that direction as we think about accountable care organizations taking risk in healthcare. They also understand that tapping into that social safety net makes a much better outcome for everyone.
Thanks, Sheila. Thank you so much. Dora, do you want to jump in at all in regards to the policy framework?
Yeah, and so, you know, I like to point out what Romilla and Sheila are describing. I mean, it's fantastic work. They are, I mean, the leaders of the leaders in terms of the plans. The downside is that there are so many seniors and older Americans who are not their members. They are not part of the plans, and so they don't have access to these amazing services and the work that they're doing. And so, again, back to the public health perspective, how do we think more in the collective impact type model? How do we, instead of providing food to millions of Americans in need, how do we think about why are we facing food insecurity in the first place in this nation? And how do we more collectively work to address the core, the root cause of the issues? And that is, in fact, part of the work on the public health side. That is what a number of us are focusing on, but in partnership with those that are already addressing the immediate needs. And from the policy perspective, and obviously public health and policy, I mean, they go hand in hand. I mean, I could give an example of if we want to continue on with food themes, one of the issues in the midst of the pandemic is that you could not use your food stamps online. And so for those that rely upon food stamps, they had to go into the stores, again, increasing their risk and exposure. So my point is that we need to rethink how we are tackling these issues. What are the solutions? What changes have been made and need to be continued moving forward and to address this set of challenges? And the final thing I would say, in this country, I mean, the unfortunate reality is we spend, you know, sometimes up as twice as much on healthcare services as opposed to health and social services. And we really need to flip the script on that and really make sure we're shoring up our social safety net, just as we think about our medical safety net.
Yeah, I think that's so great, Dora, and you're right to call out the work that Sheila and the team at UHC and Romilla and the team at SCAN are doing really is looking so inclusively at these issues of social determinants of health. But that needs to be more common across the nation. I agree with you. I also agree that it's, we have an opportunity right now in a very, very challenging time, not just because of COVID, but because of growing acknowledgement of social reckoning that has to occur in this nation. And we have a chance to really build something new, not just tweak around the edges. That's sort of what I hear you saying, Dora. And I absolutely agree with you. And I'm really pleased for us to be in the work together, which leads me, Tim, back to you. How have you found, I really appreciated that you called out Sam too, because, you know, food is medicine, the arts are medicine, social connection is medicine, housing, it's all right about well-being. Have you found physicians, I know, for example, that Carla does some social prescribing. How has Engage interacted with the healthcare community?
I think it's a larger issue than a physician, an individual physician. I think that Mark Friedman called out the idea that you know, isolation is not something that has an easy medical intervention, so it requires a social intervention. And so the idea of lifting that up, as other countries have, we've talked about the UK and Australia, the idea that there has to be some payer system that's connected to it to incentivize people to prescribe something social. We see the arts and lifelong learning and intergenerational connectivity as incredibly effective social interventions. And that is the thing that creates lifestyle, and Mark discussed the opposite of isolation. The problem of isolation and loneliness is that you have to get to the other side of it. And the other side of it has been talked about a lot here: sense of community, sense of purpose, relationships, all of the things that make our lives better. And Dora pointed out the idea that healthcare and health are two different words altogether. It's kind of like arts and artists. We need a healthcare system, but we also need to try and find ways to create better ways for people to improve their personal behavior, to check off the boxes of health benefits.
Yes.
And that starts with us. It starts with our social lives, and battling isolation and loneliness is complex work. So the innovation and the solution has to be complex as well. The connectivity between health plans and the health system have to include social organizations. And I do not mean social services organizations. I mean social organizations that really create pathways and innovations to make room for the human component in this.
Yeah, pathways to connection. And we hope that connection is as contagious as COVID-19 is, right? We need connection to be contagious as well. We're getting some questions in the chat, so anyone can jump in. Lots of affirmation and wondering about, and I can say from the AARP Foundation standpoint, wanting to be sure that when we build programs, we're culturally responsive and developing culturally appropriate responses and programs in multiple languages. That is certainly true at AARP, and certainly true of Nancy McPherson and the great AARP team that's out in California. And the state directors across the nation. But I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in around programming. Tim, do you offer programs in multiple languages?
Yeah, and also culturally, our base is in Los Angeles, which was obviously one of the most diverse counties in the country, and you know, the diversity of the population that we serve is vast. And it is a complex situation. There are 70+ languages spoken in our buildings, and reaching people across that is a challenge. But there are certain things that are very, very effective. One of them is the arts, another is food. Two of the things that we've talked about on this panel are connective tissue across any language, any cultural barrier. And obviously we're in a time right now where we have to pay a lot of attention to what's going on with race in this country, and how that has an effect on older generations, all generations, and trying to find a way to, again, a sense of purpose. How do we get people involved in civic engagement? It's very important to address that issue.
Others want to jump in? We're getting, again, a lot of questions. In essence, the questions are about how do we build solutions that really address the complex needs for vulnerable populations. Sheila, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just want to maybe tag on to a couple of things that have been said. And it really is also about saying how big is the issue, to help inform people who may not be as close to it as many of the speakers are here today. Educating our colleagues about the issues surrounding social disparities and social determinants of health are a critical focus area at UnitedHealthcare, because we all live and work in communities. We're not an organization, we're a collection of people. Yes. And so as we think about how to bring this information to light, because of our scale and because this is such a locally focused effort, we're trying to engage in a model that will allow us to assist community-based organizations in quantifying their value in the whole ecosystem. And that model is we call imputed market price. And it's really a patent pending tool that I developed that allows us to place a value on all of these critical things that we are talking about here today, not only so we can start to incorporate that into the overall view of delivery of health in the healthcare system, yes, but it also allows us to help those community-based organizations with information and yes, with value propositions that allow them to continue to grow in our current funding environment, yes, while we think about changes in policy that what may be longer term.
Great.
And I'd love to talk more about that, but that I think is it's a critical piece in showing the value.
Yeah, thanks, Sheila. I'm going to go into a wrap-up flash round here, but you're absolutely right, Sheila. You, Romilla, Dora, and Tim, you all talked about health as really a whole rich topic, really about equity, health equity for individuals and for communities. And I am very supportive of each of us doing better and more work to share the value that we know is being delivered to individuals and communities across diverse sectors and organizations. Important, but as Dora said, it's collective impact work, and guess what? That's hard. And oftentimes individuals and organizations don't have the will to stick with it because it's very disciplined, rigorous work, but boy, is it needed. So let's wrap up. You've all been fabulous, but when you think about increasing connection post-pandemic, what's the most important thought that you'd want to leave the audience with? Romilla, I'm going back to you.
I think for us, it is identifying the population, and it is the power of human touch. We alone cannot do it. So we have to collaborate by strengthening the community capacity. So working with folks like, once again, Tim and One Generation and the Friendship Line and others. That's one thing. And then also supporting volunteerism. So we do that a lot. And last but not the least, let's not forget the older adults in the conversation themselves. Ask them. They have better ideas than you and me can come through together. Connect them. Maybe that's what we need to do.
I love that, Romilla. Ask and we will be told. That is the real, and then listen after you ask the question. Tim.
I think ageism has to come into this conversation as part of this too, and in paying attention to the older adult. We're faced with a lot of isms right now, and on the one hand, we've been told older adults are expendable. On the other, we've all been given a dose of what isolation feels like. So I think that we've been able to relate to what older adults have been facing for a long time. And I think intergenerational connectivity is a very important piece of that. One thing that was mentioned about housing earlier is creating buildings that are multi-generational, but another piece of it is socially prescribing intergenerational programming. You know, we heard from Trent Stamp, we're supported by the Eisner Foundation, and creating connectivity between generations is an incredibly effective way to put that to bed.
Yeah, and you know, we run AARP Foundation Experience Corps, so thank you, Mark Friedman and others, and we certainly find that it's great for children, great for schools, great for communities, and great for the connection of our older adult volunteers. So thank you for reminding me of that, Tim. Dora.
I just have to say I love the Experience Corps as well. Give a shout out for that. The one thing I would just circle back to where you started with your mention of intersectionality and also connect that to health equity. And when we think about health equity, we can't forget that includes racial equity.
That's right.
And as we're thinking about what this pandemic, as well as the George Floyd's killing, we just have to be very mindful that as we move forward, that we must take into account the race and ethnicity and other demographic variables for the communities and the individuals that we're trying to serve, and tailor our interventions accordingly. It cannot be a one-size-fits-all solution. We have to keep in mind who we're serving, why we're serving, and what their needs are. So that would be my one wish that I would put on the table today.
Yeah, Dora, I think that's a great wish. And our research at AARP Foundation, you know, we actually know who's at greater risk for social isolation. And it is low-income older adults, it is LGBTQ older adults, it is unpaid caregivers, and it is any older adult who identifies in a population that is marginalized. So you're right, solutions have to be designed to meet the needs of the individuals who need them most. Appreciate that so much. Sheila.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity, and to all of the fellow panelists. It's just wonderful to see truly how far things have come. Yes, we have a significant way to go, but we've started the conversation in a much different way, really in this collaborative approach, in looking holistically, but still trying to understand the individual and the impacts that their extended families have on their overall health. And when I say families, it's not necessarily relatives. We find that caregivers are in large part, because we track this, not a member of the family. It could be a neighbor, it could be a friend. Those individuals are helping sustain health as much as community-based organizations, and being able to give voice to all of the parts of the system that help keep our communities healthy is really where I think we're all trying to go. And at UnitedHealthcare, we're very proud of the start, and we know that it's a journey.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sheila. I'm just so pleased, Romilla and Sheila, Tim and Dora, to be able to have this conversation with you, and to know that together it takes all of us to solve this crisis. You know, we're in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic. We're in the midst of a 401-year-old racism pandemic, and we can and we must do better. And human connection matters and is key to the future for health equity and opportunity for everyone. So huge thank you, Tim, Dora, Romilla, and Sheila. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again, Lisa.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
What an incredible panel. Lisa, I'm going to ask you to stay on for a moment here. And I'm going to call back Nora Super, hopefully that she can join us, just to close up. To all our attendees, I know we're a little bit over the noon hour here, Pacific time, and really appreciate you all staying. But I don't think any of us want this to come to an end.
No.
So I don't know how we can close this. And I think the good news is that it's really just the beginning. So I'm hoping that Lisa and Nora, again, first, I just want to thank you for the incredible privilege of being able to work together on this and on this ongoing work. But if we could just begin by what are some closing thoughts, some key insights, takeaways, and calls to action personally for each of us, but also for our attendees?
Put on my glasses so that I can read what I wrote down and give Lisa a chance to collect her thoughts. But I learned such a great deal. It was such a wonderful group of people watching the chats. Really, really am excited that so many people have come together and excited to work on a report that puts this all together. Some of our key calls to action that I heard is we must act now and use the COVID pandemic as an opportunity to educate and reach out to policymakers and funders. Caregivers, especially diverse caregivers, are struggling right now because their opportunities for respite care are gone and they are socially isolating. We need to focus on continuing education and information to caregivers to increase resiliency and protect health. One of the key things I heard over and over is we need to listen more. You know, it made me think Hamilton is about to come out on TV tomorrow, and that song that Aaron Burr sings of talk less, smile more. I think that's a good lesson for all of us. And we learned a lot about how we should be looking to partner with and listen to community-based organizations and follow their lead, especially when it comes to working in communities of color. We have to increase funding for community-based organizations, that's clear, to ensure we don't go back to a socially isolated society after COVID is over. We heard from many people about how we need to fund research about what interventions work so we can spread them and prove their effectiveness. And finally, we heard a lot about technology and how technology can assist in bridging the distance, but we must meet older adults where they are and learn from them how they prefer to communicate. So a call out to all of the tech companies that are online, as we say, please design with us, not for us. Thanks for having us. Been great.
I share the key takeaways there. Just to your last point, I noticed a lot of activity in the chat, and I can't wait to see how this gets attacked and addressed in the report. But also in terms of that inclusive design, thinking about hearing impairment, thinking about visual impairment, and just thinking about ableism in general.
That's right.
When we're talking about being as inclusive and really building towards equity, and it just ties with this so clearly.
Yeah, I mean, Scott, what to add? Nora, you just captured everything, and I would just thank both of you. What an ongoing delight it is to work with the two of you and to have our organizations come together and really use our shared reach to pull in the incredible leaders who have been on the call. And I guess my other takeaway is that you've built a community, Scott and Nora, and together we've built a community of real teachers who know that they're also learners, right? There's been a lot of learning mindset across today. I'm also reminded, Nora, as you're doing the key takeaways, we heard so much of the oft said call, nothing about me without me. And that is very, very important as we're coming together collectively to address the epidemic of loneliness and social isolation. Integration and collaboration matter. It's not about, one organization over another. I'm always reminded of that. But together, our human resources, our financial resources, our intellectual resources, we can do this together, Scott and Nora. And then the equity issue. If we intend to address social isolation and loneliness, we have to do it from an equity building framework. That will be critically important as we go forward.
100%. I mean, I think we heard again and again today, the genie's not going back in the bottle. This is a transformative moment, and we don't want to go back to the way things were before.
No.
And let's acknowledge the strong feelings. Okay, I never want to hear again that something's touchy-feely.
I know, or the softer side of science.
We all miss our hugs, right?
Feelings matter.
Yes, they do.
And there are a lot of intense feelings in the world right now, whether it's, massive loss of life and fear, or seeing images that we can't unsee and confronting grave injustice. And we should not dismiss that now. We need to move towards that, acknowledge, and really band together to solve these issues together.
Yes.
So with that, I thank you. I, again, can't thank you enough for being here and working together on this. I think that pretty much wraps it up. I would just like to one more time, I think we have some images for us to just acknowledge our sponsors, AARP Foundation, thank you, Lisa, Everytable, Gary and Mary West Foundation, Twilio.org. Of course, I want to thank everybody at the MPTF and Milken Center for the Future of Aging teams that have just been incredible, every one of you, to make this possible. I'm already seeing calls in the chat that we've got to do it again, so buckle your seatbelt. And to all the partners who helped get the word out and really helped us plan this and make it as inclusive as possible. And we're going to continue to just get more and more out there to do this together. So please, final push to just visit mptf.com. Please consider donating. If you're interested in doing one of the call hubs type programs, shoot us an email. If you like the Channel 22 organized chaos content and you think that could strengthen your community, let's partner and figure out how we can get there together. So again, it's about partnership and the beginning of a much broader conversation. With that, signing off, looking forward to working with each and every one of you. Be well.
Be well.
Bye-bye.